They tortured his dog for money, but the lawyer watched everything. They say that money makes the world go round, but for Arthur Sterling, money was just the walls of his prison. Arthur was 70 years old. He was a titan of industry, a man whose signature could move markets. He lived in a house that occupied 6 acres of the finest land in the state. He had a staff of 12, a garage full of cars he never drove, and a phone contact list full of people who only called when they wanted something. But on Christmas Eve, 8 years ago, the house was silent. Arthur sat at a dining table set for 12 people. He was the only one there. He had called his children, Julian, Clarissa, and Marcus. He had sent the private jet tickets. He had promised not to talk about business. Julian had a launch party in Tokyo. Clarissa was too stressed and needed a spa week in Bali. Marcus didn't even pick up. His assistant sent an email saying he was in depositions. Arthur stared at the turkey, cold and untouched. He realized with a heavy heart that he was the poorest man on earth. He had raised sharks, not children. That night, Arthur didn't go to bed. He put on his coat and drove his old truck out into the rain. He didn't know where he was going until he saw the sign, St. Francis Animal Shelter. The shelter was loud, smelling of bleach and desperation. Puppies jumped at the bars begging for attention, but Arthur walked past them. He wasn't looking for energy. He was looking for a friend. In the very last cage, in the shadows, sat a ball of golden fluff. A golden retriever puppy, barely 6 months old. He wasn't barking. He was sitting very still, watching Arthur with large, soulful, whiskey-colored eyes. The dog had been returned twice because he was too clingy. Arthur knelt down. He pressed his hand against the wire mesh. The puppy didn't jump. He simply walked over, pressed his warm forehead against Arthur's cold hand, and let out a long sigh. It was the first time Arthur had felt warmth in years. "You too, huh?" Arthur whispered. "You're lonely too." Arthur signed the papers. He named him Barnaby, and that night, for the first time in a decade, the Sterling mansion didn't feel empty. It felt like a home. For the next 7 years, they were inseparable. Barnaby wasn't just a pet. He was Arthur's shadow. When Arthur worked in his study, Barnaby slept on his feet. When Arthur had bad days, days where his heart rushed and his breath felt short, Barnaby would sense it before the doctors did. He would nudge Arthur's hand, forcing him to stop and pet him until the panic subsided. The children, they stayed away. They sent generic birthday cards signed by their assistants. They waited for the inevitable. They treated their father like a bank account that was taking too long to mature. But Barnaby was there for the arthritis. He was there for the pneumonia scares. He was there for the slow, quiet decline of a great man. And then came the Tuesday that changed everything. Arthur sat in his favorite armchair by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky purple. He felt a tightness in his chest. He knew. He didn't call 911. He didn't call his children. "Barnaby," he wheezed softly. Barnaby, who was dozing on the rug, immediately perked up. He trotted over and rested his heavy head on Arthur's knee. Arthur woven his fingers into the soft golden fur. "Thank you," Arthur whispered. "You were the best part." When the maid found them the next morning, Arthur was gone. But Barnaby was still there, head on his master's knee, waiting for him to wake up. Grief is a heavy thing, but greed moves faster. Before Arthur was even buried, the children descended. They swept into the mansion like a storm. They didn't cry. They walked through the rooms, pointing at paintings, appraising the furniture, arguing over who would get the vintage Porsche. They ignored the dog. To them, Barnaby was just a piece of furniture, an annoyance that shed fur on their Italian suits. "Get that thing out of here," Clarissa snapped when Barnaby tried to sniff her hand, looking for his master's scent. She kicked him away. Barnaby retreated to Arthur's study, hiding under the desk. He didn't understand why these strangers were so loud, or why his master wasn't stopping them. Then came the reading of the will. Elias Thorne, Arthur's lawyer, stood at the head of the table. He was a man of stone, with eyes that had seen too much. He read the words that Arthur had written in his final days. "To my children, I leave my forgiveness. It is the only thing I have left for you. You abandoned me in life. Do not expect to profit from my death. To Barnaby, I leave my home. I leave my fortune. I leave the care of my soul." The explosion was instant. Screaming, threats, chairs thrown. "It's a dog!" Marcus roared. "A distinct animal. This won't stand." "The trust is ironclad," Elias said calmly. "The money supports the dog. If the dog dies, the trust dissolves and the assets go to the next of kin. But while he lives, this is his house, and you are trespassing." The children left, but they didn't give up. They realized the flaw in the will. If the dog dies, the money is ours. They couldn't use violence. Elias was watching. So they chose psychological warfare. They decided to break the dog's spirit. They used the house against him. It started with the voices. Julian hacked the smart speakers in the bedroom where Barnaby slept. In the dead of night, he played recordings of Arthur. "Barnaby, where are you? Help me!" The voice was distorted, ghostly. Barnaby would wake up whining, running from room to room, searching for the ghost of his master. He couldn't find him. The stress began to make his fur fall out. He stopped eating. Then came the traps. Marcus hired people to trigger the perimeter alarms at random intervals, sirens wailing, lights flashing. They wanted to make Barnaby aggressive. They wanted him to bite someone so the state would deem him dangerous. Barnaby wasn't dangerous. He was terrified. He was a grieving orphan being haunted by the technology his master had built. One night, during a thunderstorm, the smart gate opened. A voice called out from the street, a deep fake of Arthur, calling his name. Barnaby ran into the rain, soaked and shivering, standing by the road, waiting for a car that would never come. He would have stayed there until he froze, or until a car hit him. But a hand grabbed his collar. It was Elias. The lawyer had moved into the guest house. He pulled the wet, shivering dog into his coat. "I know, boy," Elias whispered into the wet fur. "I know they're hurting you, but we're going to stop them." The children sued for custody. They claimed the dog was insane. They claimed Elias was abusing him. They brought in experts who testified that Barnaby was a danger to society and needed to be put down. It looked like they were going to win. The law is written for humans, not dogs. In the final hearing, Marcus stood up. "Look at this animal," he sneered, pointing at Barnaby, who was huddled at Elias's feet. "He is broken. He is neurotic. It is cruel to keep him alive. Put him down, give us the estate, and let us move on." Elias stood up. He didn't have a speech prepared. He had something better. "You say this dog is broken," Elias said softly. "Let's show the court why." He dimmed the lights. He played the security footage he had secretly recorded. The court watched in horror. They saw the timestamp, 3 a.m. They heard the ghostly, hacked voice of the dead father screaming for help. They saw the poor dog running in circles, crying, pawing at the speakers. They saw the logs of Julian and Marcus laughing as they triggered the alarms. The silence in the courtroom was different this time. It wasn't the silence of boredom. It was the silence of shame. Elias turned to the children. Arthur didn't leave the money to Barnaby because he hated you. He left it to Barnaby because Barnaby was the only one who treated him like a human being, and even after he died, you couldn't let him rest. You tortured his best friend. The judge's face was hard as stone. She looked at the three heirs, who were now shrinking in their seats. There is no law deep enough to punish what I just saw, she said, but I will try. She stripped them of everything. The lawsuit was dismissed. The legal fees, hundreds of thousands of dollars, were charged to the children, and, in a rare move, she issued criminal referrals for animal cruelty and cyberstalking. The children walked out of that courtroom into a storm of paparazzi and police. They had lost their reputation, their freedom, and their father's legacy. But Elias and Barnaby, they walked out the back door. If you go to the Sterling estate today, you won't find a lonely old man. You won't find silence. You will hear barking. You will hear laughter. Elias used the money to turn the mansion into the Sterling Senior Dog Sanctuary. It's a place where old dogs, the ones nobody else wants, come to live out their days in luxury. And there, sitting on the porch, is Barnaby. He is older now. His muzzle is gray, but he isn't shaking anymore. He isn't looking for ghosts. He lies in the sun, surrounded by his new pack, watching the driveway. He knows Arthur isn't coming back, but he also knows that Arthur would be smiling, because in the end, love didn't just win. It built a home. They tried to break a dog to steal a fortune. Instead, they reminded the world that loyalty is the only currency that matters. If this story touched your heart, please share it. Let's remind everyone that sometimes the best people are dogs.